The recording is in progress.
Okay. I'd like us to start with the Mark passage first and remind ourselves that Mark is the shortest gospel, probably the first one written, and it really was written almost like a soliloquy to be shared in one sitting. And it leaves out a lot of things, but it includes what we need, especially for today. And today our lesson, the first one we're going to read out loud is Mark 7, 24 through 30. And I wonder if it's not very long, but I wonder if we could start and each one read a verse as far as we can go. And let's see. Let's start with you.
One verse.
Just one verse, okay,
Okay.
starting with Mark. Make sure you've got it. Mark 7, 24 through 30.
Okay. The heading is the Syrophoenician woman's faith.
Right.
From there he set out and went to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there, yet he could not escape notice.
But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet.
Now the woman was a Gentile of the prophesying origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter.
He said to her, let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs.
But she answered him, Sir, even the daughters under the table eat the children's crumbs.
Then he said to her, for saying that, you may go, the demon has left your daughter.
So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone.
Now, this is an odd story. How's your Bible geography?
No.
Do you know where she lived?
No.
Syria? Not really.
Well, she lived about as close to the upper Galilee. It was, you know where the Sea of Galilee is in the Bible map? And she lived right at the border above that. And she was apparently Greek, Syrophoenician. She was not, she was a Gentile. And we don't know what her religion was. We don't know if she was worshipped Greek gods, the polytheistic. We don't know much about her. But what's this about dogs? What do we know about calling somebody a dog?
Not complimentary.
It was pretty bad.
The
It was
lowest.
like cussing her out. And we're surprised that Jesus talked like that to a woman. But we need to stop and think. Rabbis didn't talk to women in public. They talked to their wives, and if they had their wives with them, their wives would talk to the woman. You didn't, you know, it just wasn't done. And Jews really didn't associate with the Syrophoenicians. So right off, we're tipped off that there's something strange here. And why would our dear precious Jesus, baby Jesus from the manger, call somebody a dog? Now, we have terms of degradation that are very similar to this that we don't say in church. Usually starts with son of a dog, a female dog. But this is even worse than that. To call somebody a dog meant you're an untouchable. We don't associate with you. But she's persistent. And one of the things that this series of lessons is really about hypocrisy. How do members of the church really interface with people who are non-believers?
Yeah.
Do we exclude them? Or even if we're kind and polite, do we think, well, they really haven't got it? Or do we think this is an opportunity that, like Jesus, every opportunity he took, he talked with people that were outside the synagogue? And it was always on his way to the synagogue that he stopped and did his countless miracles and met with the multitude. So I think there's something in these Lenten lessons that have to do with not we, they, or us and them's, but we're all God's children wherever we are in the faith story. This woman has remarkable faith, and she taught Jesus. She showed him that we really are all children of God. And she would have been considered for him an untouchable. Dogs were like pigs, only worse. And so it's hard for us because we love dogs and have dogs in our house. It's a little difficult to think about a society for whom she was an untouchable and dogs were untouchable. They were considered outside the realm of acceptability in the home. So my New Testament professor said it was like Jesus was saying that she was a child of a female dog. You know that saying in English that we wouldn't even say in church in a lesson as a teacher. It wouldn't be proper. It would be uncouth. And so there's something uncouth about this story that God neutralizes. See, that's when do you think of our precious dear Jesus calling he called her a dog.
Well, I don't understand that.
I
I
know.
know you said that there's great division between the groups, but
Yeah,
to me, I just can't believe.
I know. He was a
But
man.
it's unfathomable.
He was a man of his own culture, and he had been carefully taught by the rabbis, and he was a rabbi. The difference between what's clean and what's unclean.
But he's also the son of God.
Yes, but this is the story we're given by Mark, and it's also in Matthew. Michael?
There's several weeks here I don't understand.
Okay.
She asked him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he says, let the children be fed first. We're just the feeding.
He's talking about his understanding is he has been called to minister to the children of God, to the Israelites, not to the
Offspring of
the Greeks, the Syrophoenicians. They're outside the pale.
So the food is metaphorical, it's his energy, it's his wisdom, it's his healing and teaching.
She's teaching
It's
him.
not for
I-
her.
yeah. See, he's a good Jewish rabbi. Men don't talk to women. It was, it's not 2023 Oceanside, La Mesa, San Diego. Men and women don't sit together in synagogue. And a man would talk to his wife, and then the wife would talk to the woman. It was a different society. So but Jesus is taught by her. And what's her lesson to him? Does she give up and go away and run away? No, she persists. And she knows she's in the presence of a healer. And I think she heals his parochial orthodox understanding as a good rabbi about what's clean and what's unclean, what's holy, and life is holy. And she ministers to him and breaks open his ministry. That it is, he's been taught that she's a dog, she's an untouchable. And rabbis don't talk to women anyway in public. They would talk through the husband. And the men would be here and the women would be up here in the balcony. As American Blacks were often in churches. Architecture, place at the table. It's a hard story, but it's quite a lovely story because it really bursts open Jesus' ministry on behalf of all of us
Mhm.
who were not born into the Jewish lineage. Can we have a hallelujah for that?
Hallelujah.
Let's have a hallelujah for that. You know, the whole book of Mark was designed to be read in one sitting. And sometimes the scholars of Mark, even in the early Jewish community, would recite this, not like entertainment or a sermon, but as an event. They would recite the book of Mark. And so Mark is the shortest of the Gospels, but it's so powerful in its language. It's a very earthy gospel. And this is quite a lovely story. Now, before we talk any much too more about it, let's go to Matthew 15 and read 21 through 28. And we're going to kind of compare and contrast, but not as our major work today. We're just going to keep our ears open and see what you think about it as you compare these two readings together. Let's start this way with Grace. And Grace, would you start in with Matthew chapter 15, verse 21, and each read a verse? I don't know if we'll come out even like we did this time, but it'll be close. Thanks.
Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon.
Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon."
But he did not answer at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us."
He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
But she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me.
He answered, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs.
She said, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table.
Then Jesus answered her, O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire. And her daughter was healed instantly. Who's teaching whom? On this day, who's the teacher?
Mhm. Yeah, she definitely is the
She's teaching
teacher.
him. She's
Yeah,
persistent.
yeah.
And she opens up a worldview to the kid from Galilee, who's a devout rabbi and been a whiz kid since he was 12, mesmerized the great prophets, the great rabbis in Jerusalem. And this is opening up, this is his dissertation in graduate school.
Mhm.
This is when God breaks open the parochialism of prejudices that we're each taught as we grow up.
Mhm.
Did any of you ever experience people outside of church that you were amazed were almost saint-like, but they weren't churchgoers? Really good, what we'd call salt of the earth.
Oh, yeah. I've
Yeah,
experienced
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Never surprised me. I've never assumed that people who don't walk into a church building regularly are not good people.
Yeah.
Or that they
Yeah.
aren't people of faith either, which is, I think, part of the assumptions of this story too, that guys us all to look at our assumptions, because someone doesn't go to your church, doesn't mean that they don't have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They don't have religion, aren't a child of God.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
these two stories are so similar. Do you think they're the same story?
Uh-huh.
They seem like it to
Yeah,
me
they
too.
do.
And they're breaking open the kingdom for us as Gentiles.
Mhm.
Jesus came to be the savior of the Jews, comma, and the world.
Mhm.
And this is one of the early examples of how he learned. The woman at the well is another example where he learned. Men did not talk to women in public except their wives,
Mhm.
maybe their sisters, I don't know, but it was just a different division of human behavior.
Mhm.
And so anytime that Jesus is having a conversation with a woman alone, he's not treading on thin ice,
Mhm.
but he also is a very he's God's true whiz kid. He's a quick learner.
Mhm.
He is very educable, even though he is God with us. He is learning that some of the things that we're taught growing up are things that we need to break down, not bolster up.
Mhm.
Certain prejudices and certain rules that we're taught, we need to always, uphold standard. Sometimes the standard needs to be broken and thrown to the ground, and we need to adopt new standards. And oftentimes they have to do with ethnicity, gender, and conflict when one religion knocks up against another, or a faith or a behavior, even parochial denominational differences that occur that probably aren't at all pleasing to God, that they even exist, if I can be so bold.
Mhm.
We have some questions. Do you have those same questions that I do?
Yeah, there are sheets over there.
She's okay.
Yeah.
Who are involved? What are the differences that divide Jesus and this Gentile woman from the northern territory, just north of where he lives?
Mhm.
She's Greek,
Mhm.
Syrophoenician.
She's a Gentile.
Yeah.
She's a woman. She's from a whole different culture.
And they're unchaperoned.
Oh, they're unchaperoned.
I mean, we don't have any other witnesses
Yeah.
there, except maybe the author. I don't think Mark was there, but who told this story?
In Matthew, there's the disciples that are telling.
Oh, yeah, the disciples are there in the Matthew story, which is a little longer and has some more details. But rabbis did not talk. There wasn't the women's group that the rabbi talked with.
Mhm.
The women were in the gallery above and could eavesdrop. They weren't excluded, but they weren't included. Yeah. No, although in some of the stories in the Gospels, there were women in the temple that you knew had honor and stature. So
Yeah.
we don't know exactly. And those are just interesting questions. How in the world did these two human beings, this woman who was worried about her daughter, who was near to death, different culture, different gender, different time for us. What's in this story for us? What can we make of it?
Well, it's a deep-seated love of motherhood. I mean, you give birth and that's your child.
Yeah.
And so you'll do anything
Anything.
to help the child survive.
Exactly. That's a really good point.
Mhm.
You think that might have moved Jesus to think a little differently and not think of that young girl, that precious child, as a dog? Dogs were unclean. I mean, they were like pigs, only worse to Jews. I mean,
Well, animals take care of their young. They're fierce. Mother lions. Animals will take care of their young. They're fierce.
Yes, yeah,
So.
yeah.
So maybe he saw a relation. I don't know.
Any of you remember any prejudices that you were carefully taught? Any people that you weren't even to really look in the eye or talk to? Did you miss out on that? I was carefully groomed.
Yeah, I was too.
I was carefully taught.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
deliberately taken on the L in Chicago to the south side where all the black people live and pointed out by my mother that look how those people live.
Hmm.
And I think she was trying to prepare me to live in the world, and I was going to be a student nurse in Chicago, and some of my patients were going to be black people.
Mhm.
But I just didn't live in the same world she lived in. And it was time for changes to come about.
Mhm.
And I had good teachers that taught me differently. And my best teaching nurse at the hospital at Chicago Wesley Memorial Hospital in 1959 in Chicago on the near north side was a black woman. I think she was from Jamaica. She had to be at the top of her skill because that Methodist hospital was deliberately trying to teach us that white people are not the only good people.
Mhm.
So she had to be at the top of her profession to have been called there.
Mhm.
And they deliberately integrated every 2-bed ward.
Mhm.
And the thing that was so amazing about that, I may have told you this before, I don't know, because it really impacted me. Blue Cross and Blue Shield paid your whole hospital room bill if it was a 2-bed room. Now, the Methodists knew that ran this hospital.
Mhm.
So wherever possible, people were put, everybody wanted a 2-bed ward, 2-bedroom, semi-private, not private, but semi-private, because it paid their insurance.
Mhm.
Well, people would say, well, I'm not, there's a black person in there. We'd say, that's a human being in there. We were supposed to say yes,
Mhm.
and you're a Caucasian, and
If you
you're
want
both
your
ill.
room paid for, that's the best
Yeah,
way.
now if you want to go to a private room, which their insurance wouldn't pay. Oh, well, and almost always those people who were both ill in the same room helped each other.
Mhm.
You know, if you're in the hospital and your light doesn't get hooked to your pillow and you can't turn on your light and you're bedfast, your roommate will help you.
Mhm.
And your phone rings, but it's too far away to get from your bedside table, and your roommate, if they're up in ambulatory, they'll help you. Now, what do you think people learned at Wesley Hospital,
Yeah.
Good Methodist Hospital?
That they didn't need to be so fearful.
Not to be so fearful. This is a human being,
Yeah.
not a dog. And see, Jesus is learning this is a human being.
Mhm.
Michael,
I'm having a lot of trouble with this.
all right.
Is there, I can't recall, though I'm sure I have read this story before, but is there any other instance where Jesus rejects someone as unworthy?
Yeah, the woman at the well.
Mhm.
No, I don't think he rejects her. Doesn't he speak to her?
He just asks her for water. I don't think he rejects her.
No, I don't think he rejects her.
Mhm.
Well, he tells her to go get her husband because he doesn't talk to women.
Well, that's not rejecting her.
Well, if you're
I
a
don't
woman, it
think-
might feel like it.
That's putting up a barrier for sure. Go get your husband. I'll talk to him.
Yeah.
Right?
But where he refers to her as a dog,
Yeah,
I know. That's the point. This is,
doesn't seem like Jesus, you
it
mean?
certainly doesn't seem like Jesus.
Yeah.
Who
Well, Jesus-
prepared him?
His father and his mother.
No, I mean, who prepared him for his mission?
I believe he came prepared, but he was human as well, and he grew up in his own neighborhood.
I understand that,
Okay,
but
well, a good Jewish man didn't talk to even a Jewish woman in public. Part of it is different rules.
I still have a lot of problem with this.
Michael, are you saying that you can't understand how the humanness of Jesus superseded the divine nature?
That's about the size of it.
Yeah, yeah.
I would think his Father in heaven would have prepared him for his mission. And I can't accept that part of that preparation saying, well, you only teach these people, but not these people.
I think Jesus was highly educable, but I think he was a man of his own neighborhood. And the rules were very strict.
Could it be? You know, we're talking about this, these are witnesses. Mark and Matthew, I don't know if they were actual witnesses, but they were
Yeah.
witnesses to the thinking of the time. Would we be reading into Mark and Matthew, what he's thinking that Jesus should think?
That's possible, but it's a poor depiction of Jesus they have presented. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's all.
I'm done.
I didn't need to interrupt you. So what is the time frame? We have Jesus who's 12, and then you have him
In his
you know,
early
on
30s.
the road.
Yeah,
Essentially, so I essentially don't know what happened in between, or
no, that we don't really know. Some scholars think he may have even been in India. We don't know. He worked for his dad as a carpenter. And we Protestant Anglo-Saxons think he was celibate. But rabbis that have been, some of my teachers said, no, he wasn't. Because if you were a rabbi, you were married, or stated like John the Baptist, you lived alone out in the desert. That Jewish scholars are absolutely convinced that Jesus was a family man because a rabbi had a wife.
And so where did he do that training, the rabbinical study that he would have needed in order to?
He probably could have done it in his own town, but if you're already a whiz kid, if you're teaching the high priests in Jerusalem when you're 12, somebody's already earmarked you, or this is not an average. This is a very brilliant, interesting child.
Like the Dalai Lama,
What?
like the Dalai Lama.
Yeah. And we don't have all the facts, and we can conjure up filling in the gaps. It doesn't mean that that's gospel truth, but it certainly is Jewish scholarship to always imagine what's left out and discuss it and debate it.
I wonder too, if it's one powerful education and example for us. For Jesus to go through these different levels of awareness
Yeah, I think
and
so.
trials.
Yeah.
And I think we really are getting a bird's eye view of Jesus' cultural, there's a term like cultural shock. When something you've been taught is orthodox, is wrong, or has to be revised. I mean, he is a human being. He didn't come down in a capsule as a fully formed adult. He was a product of his teaching as a Jew.
His culture,
The
culture he was surrounded by. Yeah. So he's embedded in that.
Yeah.
And then he's out in the world.
And God is
encountering
still
these-
working on
Yeah.
Jesus, who's no longer in heaven, but is on earth and has been groomed with his ABCs. And how important it is when we're growing up to learn how we act with other people. I mean, it's very important in those first 5 years that you, even if you can't read yet, you know which is the boys' bathroom and which is the girls' bathroom when you go to kindergarten. That's one of the first things they make sure you know.
Yeah.
So you'll get in trouble through no fault of your own.
Yeah.
But there are all kinds of things that we learn. Maybe not through the spoken word, but by my great aunt used to have a particular little jerk of her hand with my little hand when I was about to go astray, and I wasn't even being naughty. I was just being curious. kind of reined me in a little bit. And then she'd explain later. She said, I'll tell you later.
Mm.
And she would. But you know, you do that with a dog. You teach him to heel.
Mhm.
And the dog knows that, all right, you know, they know who's the boss.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you later. There's not time to go into this now. Did any of you ever have experiences like that growing up
Yes.
as a youngster
Mhm.
with a kind, good grandmother or parent or aunt or brother or?
Yeah.
My parents, I grew up in the late forties
Yeah.
and fifties as a pretty much understood kind of what was going on. And the parents did things, they didn't come out and say things about race and things like this as much. But there was a subtle thing, well, that guy drives a Cadillac, he's black people drive a Cadillac, so forth. There was those types of.
That's right.
Of things that were said.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things, one of my dad's greatest heroes, however, was Archie Moore from San Diego, a great boxer. And that was his hero in terms of boxing. And Florence Chadwick, they actually owned the same restaurant years later.
Huh.
It was Archie Moore's restaurant, or Florence Chadwick's, and then later it was Archie's Moore over on Market Street. But those are people he talked about all the time. Sports is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Dad played handball, pretty good handball player, and he played handball with a lot of Mexican Americans.
Okay.
So he didn't have a prejudice against Mexican Americans.
Hmm.
But there was that little issue about blacks. I don't think he dealt with blacks that much.
Yeah.
But that's the way he saw it. And
Yeah.
growing up in Lemon Grove, Mount McGill was an all-white school. I mean, there were some Mexican Americans there. Helix had some Mexican Americans, but it was an all-white school. And integration in East County, the very first place that there was integration, really, because of the real estate laws.
Okay.
Real estate agents would not sell to black people, and they were tied into Logan Heights in that area there for the most part. And so it was this town, La Mesa, which was a little bit richer than all the other East County, is the first ones that began to have black people going to school here and so forth. And that was because the people that moved in here were tied into the richer black people.
Oh,
Sons
really?
and daughters of Charger football players, et cetera, et cetera. And
Oh,
so that's where it began, was
I
right there
didn't-
before
I
the
hadn't heard
laws
that.
began to come in. But yeah, we had definite civil rights. Now, for me, it was sports again. Playing sports, you're going to deal with all different races and so forth and so on. And so as a result, you began to deal with it.
Yeah.
And in college, it was different in college, in that, especially in the athletic area, but YMCA
yeah.
that I worked for and all those. So you began to understand, and about that time, of course, now the issues were out in front. because
Yes.
of Dr. Martin Luther King and that situation, so we were beginning to see things a lot different.
Yeah. It's a big learning curve. We've lived in an interesting time,
Mhm.
but this is also, this is. a
This
story
is
about
now
breaking down
now we have
What's
more
Bass's story?
now we have more discrimination based on sexuality and gender identity than on race. Not that we don't still have problems with race, but the big protests are about trans access to changing rooms and bathrooms and things like that.
Yeah,
And that's what the
We have-
segregation laws they're passing are about.
yeah, she's saying we have much more discrimination about sexual identity, who uses what
Yes,
bathroom,
yes.
all that stuff now than than was ever present at that time. Because
No,
almost,
I'm not saying it was more than was then. I'm saying that now we still have some race-based discrimination. I'm not saying that's not an issue, but the more active discrimination, the
Yes.
discrimination now that's like the discrimination then is based more on sexual and gender identity.
yeah,
Can you repeat that louder?
I was gonna say, is the volume up?
I don't know how to,
I don't know how I can talk any louder.
I know. Well,
I'm
I'm gonna
speaking
try
as
to repeat
loudly and
what
clearly
Kathy
as I can.
Kathy can jump in. and correct me, it's fine. What she's saying is now we not only have racism, but on top of it, we have all this stuff, all the discrimination and prejudice against people who have different sexual preferences or are trans or
Yeah.
all that stuff has come to the fore. Whereas when I was growing up, that was all hidden. I mean, it was truly hidden in the 50s, late 40s, 50s, you know, what? There are men who love men? What? I mean, it just wasn't part of what was acknowledged or seen. I'm sure people knew that existed, but not in my little town. Or not in my little cultural bubble that I grew up in. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well-
Thanks.
I used to tell people I had 9 grandsons and 8 granddaughters. Now I have 8 grandsons and 9 granddaughters because there has been a switch by one of the grandsons.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this has been accepted totally by the whole family.
Yeah. Yeah. Which shows you that times have really changed. Maybe we are becoming more compassionate as we evolve as a species. I hope.
Whenever I'm the same in my family. I have one granddaughter who's gay, and I have a great granddaughter who calls herself binary, and I'm not even sure what that is. But her mother is estranged from my son, the grandfather, so I'm not sure what that means, but I know that one of my granddaughters is talking with her, and so I'm just listening. But whatever we were taught about human sexuality is still in flux because science and human nature or nature itself continue to evolve. And if Michael has a grandson that is now a granddaughter, and I have a granddaughter who is gay, and my other granddaughter has a child who doesn't denote a sex. We're living in a different world where instead of something being in the closet or shameful is different. And my own understanding of this is it has something to do, not the whole ancient story of homosexuality, but gender disruption, I would call it. I think is the Earth's reaction to overpopulation.
Oh.
And the reason I think that is because I know in the animal kingdom, there are any number of species that can morph sexuality when there's an overpopulation. They simply are born one thing and become something else. There used to be a parrotfish up at the aquarium in Monterey that had done this. And if all the males were gone, the strongest female parrotfish morphed into a male. But it was one way, you couldn't morph back. And so here she was on her way to becoming the king of the fish school. And here came a male and she was stuck. She was neither this nor that. Well, if the animal kingdom does that, I know that penguins, if same-sex couple of penguins get together because there is an uneven number in the genders, they just can't even rest till they go get a rock that looks like an egg. And they'll sit on that. Now, somebody that knew about that also had a little penguin whose parents had died and snuck it in on them. And they raised that little penguin and it went on to be a regular penguin that wasn't gay. Now, I think we have to learn from the animal kingdom that this is God's world and we don't have all the answers. I don't know. I don't know. I know I was taught, first of all, that was a sin. And then I was taught that it was not a sin, but sort of an anomaly, like a mistake of nature. But overpopulation on the world is hinting to me that it is not an anomaly. If there are too many people, some of them are not going to be reproducers. I don't know.
No, yeah. Then on the same, now, about those penguins. I know they sat on the rock and they raised could they, you said they change, can they reproduce? Could the parrotfish reproduce?
I don't know. I think so.
Or is it just?
No, I think-
leadership
I
or
think-
the kind of the mentality of.
No, I think that if that was the only male, that female fish morphed into an adult male fish, it was a reproducer. Yes, it saved the flock. I know fruit flies do that too. If a frost hits and all the males are killed, some of the females morph into males, but it only works for one generation till some contaminated fruit flies get back into town on a new batch of bananas. So I think that reproduction in life is so important, that life will go on and we will adjust to the ice caps or to the drought in ways that we could not have imagined. I don't know. But I know that we sitting here are not living in the world that we were born into, with the rules of the game. And even in baseball, the rules keep changing a little, don't they? Keep the game going, keep the game going for the goodness of the game. And life is the best game there is. And God doesn't change, but sometimes Jesus was bar mitzvahed in the temple when he was 12. He was the whiz kid. He had all the answers. He knew the book backward and forward. And it said, these are the rules. And then our loving God said, yes, that is one of my favorite books, but it isn't the only book. And it isn't enough rules for all the world. There's one rule, and that's love one another. And when you come up against the Syrophoenician woman and she needs a miracle, you listen to her, because your miracle counts for her baby as well as the babies in your own camp. I think that's partly the world. God's world is bigger than the world you and I were taught. Is that helpful?
It's helpful.
We have to keep working on it.
I'll throw one at you.
All right.
And if it's way out there, we.
No, go ahead.
Direction
That's
from
what
us.
that's why we're here.
As a teacher,
Yeah.
I was taught to be pretty much in the middle. Teach it like it was, and not emphasize my own personal beliefs
Right.
too much. I mean, if a kid asked me my personal beliefs, I would generally tell them, but I didn't try to influence them. But in that sense, just doing that,
Yeah.
we have influence to get. Okay, we had at Central High, and that I taught at for 43 years now, Central. We had a guy there, probably one of the best teachers we had at the school. He coached the mock trial team and he taught English, and he was gay.
Okay.
And I think he was pretty fair with the kids. They understood him. They understood he had his own quirks and so forth.
Okay.
And he admitted them, and it basically was that factor. And
So you're saying he was out of the closet, basically, but
Oh, yeah.
but not flamboyant. I mean, okay.
No.
He kind of, I think he was, but. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
he didn't dress, the opposite gender, but you could just look at him and you would know him just by his behavior.
Okay.
So he was basically out.
okay.
Okay, so, and he admitted it, and he was open about talking about it and so forth. So,
Okay.
okay, all that was fine with me. It was fine with my son. It was fine with my daughter, who had him for English. They thought he was one of the best teachers in school.
Okay.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
But Here's the problem. He influenced people. Now. He influenced people that I realized later on that kind of went that route. They might have gone that route anyway. They might have felt free to go that route. Okay, but how many people did he influence to go that way that maybe wouldn't have gone that way because of his particular profession, being a teacher and being out there? I mean, we
It's a good
influenced a lot of kids. I would like to think we did, but you didn't want, so now we reach a political situation. We're down in Florida, you don't teach this, you don't teach that, and so forth and so on, yet they happened. Things happened. As a teacher, I'd want to be able to teach what happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so we're looking at that. There's a point there on both sides, but I lean obviously on the teaching side of the point.
Comments?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a difficult one.
I-
We're gonna be dealing with that one for a while.
The world is always changing, and we have to live in the world. But Jesus had a comment about that, didn't he? Live in the world, but not of the world. I
Mhm.
mean, we have to live on the earth. That's where we are. And some things that are carved in stone get changed. That's kind of scary.
Mhm.
Um,
But we have all those places where it says, do not let your heart be troubled and do not be afraid. And so part of, I think, we have to step into this idea that things are always changing,
yes,
you
they are.
know,
Yeah.
and we're not making the rules. We're not running the show.
No. You know, and I was still teaching school when the "What Would Jesus Do" movement came out
Yes.
from the kids, and they wore little bracelets about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good question to ask. What would Jesus do? Jesus was a good Jewish boy that was taught, you're a rabbi and you don't talk to women out in public, especially alone. That wasn't God's rule. That was the Jewish rule. In fact, the Jews were so stuck in their rules that they missed the Messiah when he got here.
Mm.
Let me throw
Yeah.
a short story. This particular teacher ended up being more or less transferred
Okay.
he to the continuation school. Continuation school is for a lot of the kids that have tough time, as you know, in the regular school, they are pretty tough kids and stuff.
Yeah.
He went over there. What did he do? He opened up a mock trial team. Who heard of these kids that can hardly compete in the regular high school, and he's got them on a mock trial team, and they did real well,
Uh-huh.
and they respected him. They kind of understood he was different, but I thought that was pretty.
I think it's a
They did
miracle.
championship.
Yeah.
It's not that type of thing, but they were really competitive. And he went in there and those kids, somebody, a mock trial at our school. Are you kidding me?
That's good to hear.
I
It's really a
really-
good story. I
Yeah.
like it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Can God use all of us even though we're not perfect?
absolutely.
I believe so.
Hope so.
And there's that line in the Bible that says, I learned it in the King James, be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Did any ever be therefore perfect?
Yeah.
Well, I learned from a rabbi that the word for perfect in that, I didn't never learn this at seminary, but the word for perfection is a word that means in Hebrew how the acorn becomes an oak tree.
Yeah,
It's a verb that means that.
yeah.
Is the oak tree perfect? That gnarly old oak tree that's lived hundreds of years? No, it's got broken branches and crooked stems, but it's surviving. And that's how we are to become perfect. We're to be surviving, lumps and all, mistakes and all.
Mhm.
Prejudices that we were taught that we have to unlearn or try. our children and our grandchildren will help us with some of those.
Mm.
When they come toting in somebody that we were told was an untouchable, and we find out that they are higher up the food chain than our people. That's always a good lesson. Yeah. And kinder and better, not only smarter,
Mm.
but smarter with a stone around their neck, doing just fine. So I'm glad I've got to live so long that some of the things I was taught,
Mm.
I had to unlearn.
Mm.
And I'm glad for it. Do we still have, it's just like peeling the onion. Do we still get to keep learning? Yeah. And we don't get all the answers, do we?
Mm.
But it's get on the bus. We're leaving and you're to get on this bus. I'm not ready. Get on the bus. And so we go to the next story in the Bible that we.
We think of a bus, seeing all these neat things. And I listened to my dad and Jane, who we had a funeral for yesterday, talk. And they lived in a remarkable generation because they saw car and all the way from cars to radios to man on the moon.
Yeah.
We actually didn't get the first part of it.
No, and things have quieted down a little, but who knows what's going on that is going to be on the 10 o'clock news. We do live at a pretty remarkable time.
Mm.
And I think it's remarkable that the stories that are 2,000 years old were in another culture, but still have meaning for us because we have been taught by, the Old Testament. I always think this is fascinating. This is the Old Testament, and this is the New Testament. And when I first went to the Christian church, they said, well, we're a New Testament church. And they said,
Where was your
okay. But my Sunday school teachers said, no, we're not. We're the people of the book.
Mm.
And we're responsible just as much for this as this, because this was Jesus' Bible. And if it was good enough for Jesus, we better not throw it out with the wash water. We want to educate ourselves in how God relates to people, not just for 2,000 years, but maybe 12,000. I don't know. Does that?
But as a kid, I absolutely rejected the Old Testament because I thought there was too many crazy things going on there.
There were.
And I could relate a little bit to the New Testament. So.
Me too. When my family moved, what are we doing on time? It's time to quit pretty soon, but we didn't get to all our questions, but I think we've covered them as is significant for us in this room. Yeah, at this time and place. My family had moved from DeKalb, Illinois to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I felt like I was in another country. And I had been with the same kids in school, 18 of us in a class from 5-year-old kindergarten through the 8th grade. And we knew each other well. And all of a sudden I was in a school that had 1,000 kids in the freshman class. It was like a university. 1,000 just in the freshman class. We had 5 buildings on campus. And it was hard. It was like, it was like a college that might have had 3,000 kids. That wasn't a whole lot bigger than our town was a little twice that big, but anyway, I was thrown into a new world where they spoke English with a drawl and had different words. Now I knew what they were saying, but I didn't know what all they were meaning. And it was the year of integration. So I felt like I was in a foreign world. And so I decided, well, I would start reading the Bible from cover to cover to also help me control my emerging sexuality. Because I had feelings I didn't understand. And I thought, well, I'll just read my Bible. And I thought there was a lot of he and she had going on in the Bible that was not orthodox. So I got intrigued by the people of God, but it was very confusing. Very confusing. But God is present to us even when we move down to Tennessee and move back up to DeKalb. It's good to be in Sunday school together.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to
It
be
is.
together in Sunday school. Did we cover enough?
We did.
We didn't cover all the points, but there are two stories. And they have to do with breaking open orthodoxy into the living kingdom of God. Through just the right way people interact with one another and walls do come down and greater understandings are possible. That's what I think this is really about. If we worship the rules and not the meaning of the rules, we miss out on God's ability to crack open an acorn and create a wise old oak tree that lives for generations. So
Mhm.
that's, keep going with your gnarliness. Thanks for coming to Sunday school, everybody.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Marianna.
I've always enjoyed Sunday school.